Thanks for joining us today on the Marcus Combs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Combs. Today's topic is all about power. There's a great quote from John Edward Acton that goes as follows. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't know if I want to say if he was ahead of his time, because there's a lot of corrupt leaders in his time, and the power just went straight to their heads. But he was onto something for sure. Because there's something called the paradox of power, which is when a leader, once they gain all this power, they will change personalities completely. As Wired put it, the very traits that helps leaders accumulate control in the first place all but disappear once they rise to power. Instead of being polite, honest, and outgoing, they become impulsive, reckless, and rude. This article later goes on to talk about how once we have authority over others, we tend to become less sympathetic. But I'd like to shift gears a little here and talk about one study that I found while I was researching this topic from Smithsonian Magazine. There's a group of roughly 100 people, and they were split in half. One half was asked to write about an ordinary day, and the other half was asked to write about a time they felt powerful. Then they could get points, and the more points they had, the higher chance they had of winning a $100 prize. So the people that had just written about a time that they felt powerful took more points than the others that just wrote about an ordinary day. Which begs the question, does power corrupt, or does it just heighten a pre-existing ethical tendency? But for the sake of argument, let's just say absolute power corrupts absolutely. And let's go back to the original quote. There's a part to the quote that I left out, and it goes as follows. Great men are almost always bad men. This led me to thinking about Napoleon, because he's very revered as a military leader and is one of the best, if not the best, military leader ever. Plus, not to mention, the impact that he had on all of Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. So, why is he revered as a great man? Well, according to an article I read from Britannica, he had a fairly normal upbringing. His father was a lawyer, and his father did not like the French. But for some reason, Napoleon did like the French. But moving past this, Napoleon was sent to school in France, to a military school specifically. While he was in France, his father died of stomach cancer when Napoleon was 16. And that pretty much sums up his early life. Then sometime after his father died, he got to show off his military ability as a leader in Toulon, which he won the Battle of Toulon and was promoted to a general. After many military battles, like his expedition to Egypt, where they discovered the Rosetta Stone during the French occupation, Napoleon saw that the government in Paris was weak, and he planned a coup d'etat. Napoleon was able to overthrow the government and was given dictatorial powers. Two articles claim that he was very revered by the French people, with one claiming Napoleon was the most popular dictator France had ever known. He was able to hold his throne for roughly 12 years before he abdicated in 1814, after waging war on all of Europe during that time. He was exiled to the island of Elba, and for 10 months he stayed, until he made his way back to France and took the throne, for a period known as the 100 Days. He then was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and was exiled to the island of St. Helena, where he would eventually die in 1821. Napoleon's impact on the world is legendary. He basically ruled over all of Europe during the early 1800s, and was able to lead France after the French Revolution. And he's also the reason that the Louisiana Purchase happened, which doubled the size of the U.S. and gave them a piece of land which is now practically priceless. Anyways, how did the power corrupt him? Well, he led millions to die in battle across Europe. Around 250,000 men died in his invasion to Russia during the 100 Days, not to mention that he also took the throne himself twice and became the dictator of France. Well, that concludes today's segment on how power corrupts. Thanks for tuning in. See you after this short break.